Don't have any more nightmares? Everything is fine when you sleep? I'm going to ask you a question. Remember.
In December 1964, a seriously disturbed, dysfunctional couple consulted Dr. Benjamin Simon in Boston.
It's a bit of a problem.
Are you having visions?
Barney and Betty Hill's hypnosis therapy shook the field of ufology.
Visions, just flashes. No.
I'm gonna shoot that thing! I'm gonna get my gun! I'm gonna shoot it down! I'm gonna shoot that thing, man! I'm gonna shoot that thing!
Barney, listen to me. Listen to me, Barney. And try to stay calm. Nothing's gonna hurt you.
It was now no longer possible to discuss UFOs without including alien abductions, a controversial issue. According to surveys, nearly 4 million Americans fit the profile of an abductee. A growing number of victims think they have an implant somewhere in their body, tracking their moves, their state, their metabolism, and even their thoughts. They feel like lab rats being studied by another world. According to British ufologist John Spencer, Barney and Betty Hill's story was the wake-up call for the phenomenon of alien abductions.
For many years, one of the aspects of UFOs I've studied in some depth is the abduction phenomenon, the idea that people are manipulated to some degree by UFO entities, that they are taken aboard the flying saucers, that they are examined usually in some medical way, that they are sometimes given a mission, or they are perhaps implanted with devices and so on, and that they are constantly, throughout their lives, and even their children's lives and their children's lives, are affected by UFO intervention, which seems to be tracking the bloodline, which I think Bud Hopkins has described in many cases. I'm very open to the possibility, and certainly I'm totally convinced that these people are genuinely reporting a real phenomenon, a paranormal phenomenon. I'm quite sure of that. I've spoken to many of them, and perhaps most significant for me, I've found something in the order of about 20 or 30 people I've spoken to who have totally changed their lives as a result of their abduction phenomenon. They have suddenly become artistic, for example. They have suddenly become musicians, or they've gone into art from being bank clerks and accountants. They've suddenly become camera people or whatever else, where they've gone into that side of life. And it has resulted, undoubtedly, from the abduction phenomenon. The question is whether or not it's an internal or an external thing.
Reports of alien abductions have been on the rise ever since the first case was reported in 1961. People believe they were abducted while sleeping by aliens capable of passing through walls and moving instantly from one spot to another. Even though thousands of cases have been investigated, UFO experts use Barney and Betty's experience to support the existence of abductions. Their story began one night on a remote highway in the White Mountains, when the couple wandered off Route 3 and found themselves in the mountains.
September 19th, 1961, my husband Barney and I are in Montreal, and we heard a weather report that a hurricane was coming up the coast and probably would hit our hometown of Portsmouth. So we decided to return to Portsmouth, get there before the hurricane did.
Betty and Barney were on their way home from Montreal. Both had been married before and both had children, but Betty's were adopted since she was sterile.
And this was after the summer tourists, and we knew that the mountains were going to be deserted, facilities would be closed. So we went through customs and we stopped in Colebrook and got gas for the car and had a lunch. So we knew it was about 10 o'clock when we left Colebrook.
Betty was a social worker, and Barney was a postal worker and a member of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. They were both around 40 years old, and neither had any history of psychological problems.
And we're driving down through the mountains when I suddenly saw a new star in the sky. And as I watched it, it became bigger and brighter. And my first thought was, is it a comet going to hit the Earth? So we stopped the car to get out to get a good look at this. And as we did, it passed, it changed direction and passed over the face of the moon. And we could see that it had multicolored flashing lights around it. And then it turned and started coming in towards us. So we started driving south. We did this for about 30 miles. And we had no idea what this craft was. We were trying to identify it. And I put the window down and I waved to him and said, "Hi." And about a half mile south, it came out over the highway, midair, and stopped. Now, my husband had been in World War II, so he's going to get out and identify this craft. And he takes the binoculars and he walks towards it. And as he looks up, he sees a group of men standing in a window looking down at him. And at that moment, a fin-like structure parted on each side of the craft and had a red light on the end of the fin, and the craft started to come down. Barney had the feeling they were trying to capture him.
They're gonna catch us. Wait, let's get out of here, man. Let's get out of here. They're gonna catch us. Let's leave. Let's go.
Disoriented and distraught, the Hills realized where they were when they saw a sign 17 miles from the town of Concord. They had taken 2 hours longer than expected to drive through the White Mountains. The next day, they told the Army what had happened to them. The Army was quite interested, since they had detected an unidentified radar echo over the White Mountains during the same time frame. But there were holes in the Hills story.
In the beginning, we remember seeing the men in the road, but we couldn't get beyond that. And so we would go back there about once a month, thinking if we could find the spot where we saw the men in the road, we could remember what happened. And we were beginning to get little memories back, but nothing too shocking. And then Barney's health failed, and he wasn't responding to medication, so his doctor sent him to a psychiatrist. And one day Barney mentioned how we were going north through the mountains and looking for the spot, and we would find all kinds of people who had all kinds of UFO sightings, but nobody knew where the spot was. So he referred us to Dr. Benjamin Simon in Boston, and we started medical hypnosis.
A week later, Betty began to have nightmares in which she was abducted by aliens. She wrote down her dreams and told Barney about them. Ever since the night of the abduction, the couple had been suffering from health problems. Finally, 2 years after the abduction, the Hills agreed to be placed under hypnosis by Dr. Benjamin Simon. The following are excerpts from those sessions.
I want to wake up.
You're not going to wake up. You're in a deep sleep. You're comfortable, relaxed. This is not going to trouble you.
This creature, this leader is telling me something.
How? How is he getting it to you?
I can see it in his face.
Do you see his lips move? Yes.
No, his lips aren't moving. He's looking at me.
What did he tell you?
Stay there and keep looking. Just stay there, he's saying to me. It's
all right.
I'll take in my head. Just
all right.
Pull the binoculars away. God, give me strength.
All right.
Pull them down. Run! Pull his binoculars down and run. God.
All right. Calm down. Calm down.
Betty and Barney's testimony is very important, especially since it was the first of its kind. So we know that it was not tainted by media sensationalism. And they were treated by a well-known Boston psychiatrist who questioned them separately under hypnosis for a period of 6 months. They both told the same story. Betty Hill elaborated more than Barney, but he had been traumatized by what had happened to him. They were on their way back home after holidays in Canada. They were headed towards the Boston area, and they saw a UFO following them. They pulled over and saw that the UFO was hovering over the highway. They don't remember what happened after that. Next thing you know, they were back on the highway 2 hours later, feeling groggy, and they continued on their way home. Sometime later, Barney was feeling ill, and they went to see Dr. Benjamin Simon.
qu'ils ont donc été soignés sous hypnose par le docteur Benjamin Simon.
Under hypnosis, they each separately gave a very detailed account of having been abducted and taken aboard a UFO.
Chacun séparément. Le docteur Simon il y a eu
a book was written in collaboration with Dr. Simon, who had not previously believed in the existence of UFOs.
Pas possible de croire ça, mais il reconnaît.
He admitted that Betty and Barney were convinced that their story was real, and their testimony was both forceful and disturbing.
Très solide et très troublant.
Go on.
And he said, just a simple test of alterity. And I asked him what. And he said he just wants to put it in my navel. It's just a simple test.
I didn't hear that.
Too many nights.
Did they make any sexual advances to you?
We saw what we thought was the moon setting. And then we saw a group of men in the road, blocking our way. He stopped the car. The motor died. They came up, took us out of the car along a path in the woods. All they wanted to do was some simple tests to find out how we